Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. From Peterson's, I'm your host, Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. On this week's episode of You Have a Cool Job, we talk to a business owner who's had some odds stacked against her. Victoria Wagner is not only a female in a male-dominated industry, but she bought and took over a martial arts school when she was just 19 years old. So I was reading up a little bit on just some articles about you and realized that we're around the same age. And I was like, that's incredible that she owns her own business at such a young age. So I guess I first wanted to just ask you what inspired you to become a business owner of a martial arts studio?
Well, to be honest with you, I was kind of given a golden opportunity. The previous boss of mine, who was my master instructor for a couple years, he had taken over Kicks Martial Arts, and he had some things come up in his life where he needed to sell the studio. And I was 19, going on 20 years old, and he brought me into his office, and he told me all of the different options for people that he was looking at to buy the studio. And I said, well, why not me? And I think he kind of took it as a joke at first, but then he realized that I was serious, and I just knew that I loved what I did. I loved working at a studio, instructing, working the behind the scenes of the front desk, and I knew I was never going to want to do it for another boss again. So I kind of leveraged my position into him taking my offer seriously.
Yeah, how did you do that?
We all kind of said, hey, unless it's someone that, we all agree with, we're probably going to leave if you leave. And that definitely helped me. And I don't want to make it sound like I threatened him by leaving, but at the same time, I knew that I was never going to want to work for someone else again.
Right, you gave him kind of an ultimatum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So, and in terms of getting your boss then to take you seriously, did you come up against any other issues just with age since you were 19 when you bought the company?
Yes. So I applied for 8 different loans from every single bank that I could think of, the SBA, online banking. I applied for a ton of loans, and all of them denied me. So I actually talked to a very, very gracious relative who helped me out. I borrowed just a couple $1,000s from them, and I drained my savings to be able to put down the down payment on the studio. But I did not have any funding at the start because no business loan place would touch me.
Oh, wow. And that was just because you were younger and...
Yes. They told me it was all age related, and I didn't have enough time on my credit score.
Some of you may have heard a clip from this interview that we put out on social media for International Women's Day, where Victoria shared her experiences with sexism that happened when she began operating the studio, which caused her to later move to a different location.
The landlord that I had worked with at the old location had refused to take off the previous owner's name from the lease, and he had refused to put me on the lease even with a willing co-signer who had, some pretty good financials. I had been told from more than one other person that he had also referred to me as a little girl. So that kind of, no matter how many times I reached out to him over email, he still did not choose to rent to me. And that kind of hurt. I know that I'm young, and I know that I'm a woman, but at the same time, if the previous owner chose me to take over his business of over 100 martial arts students, perhaps there was a little bit of trust there that was earned. At least I would have hoped so. And to find out that he specifically didn't pick me because he saw me as a little girl was one of the worst feelings in the world. But, he ended up almost ruining my business, almost forcing me to close my doors because of his sexism, and that's something that I will never forgive.
Obviously, this has been difficult for you and really frustrating. Have you been able to translate that into your work at all, or do you plan on getting involved with any sort of women's groups for martial arts or anything like that?
I kind of had tried to channel it a little bit more and gear some of my prospects towards women. I have started working. I do free self-defense seminars at my studio, typically once every 2 months. I've started working with sororities in UNC. I've done that 2 years in a row now, and they are so awesome to work with, and they're such sweet girls, and I know that they have kind of a rape epidemic going on up at UNC right now, but they are, absolute troopers, and they're kick-ass. I work with some local Girl Scout troops as well. I do self-defense seminars for them, and my goal is to just, make people feel confident and make them aware of their surroundings.
Aside from these adversities, Victoria has been successfully running the studio now for about 2.5 years. She shared more about how she's navigated running the business since buying it.
So I took over at 19, and I'm 22 now. So it's gone really well. I mean, definitely the first summer after I took over, because I took over in October of 2016, the first summer that I took over, we had a huge drop in our student base. I lost 40 students in one summer, and that was a very scary position for me to be in. But when I looked back, a lot of these students were already on their way out the door when, before I took over, when my previous boss was still, owner. So that comforted me a little bit, understanding that it wasn't me as much so as it was just kind of life taking these students away from me. But at the same time, I still had to work really hard to bring my student count back up. And right now we're at about 140 students. So we're doing pretty well. We've moved to a larger location. It's a better area. It's a literal elementary school trifecta for us. We're right in the middle of the Cherry Creek School District. So we're doing really well now, but those first couple of years were just incredibly scary for me. I did not want to mess up.
Of course. Yeah. So what did you learn about running a business, and did you have any mentors or any guidance, or did you just kind of trial and error?
Unfortunately, the guy that I bought the business from, he moved away, so I didn't have the opportunity to speak with him to be my mentor as much as I would have liked. But I understand, his life position was very different now. However, I had a couple of people that I relied on and that I talked to that really helped me, but a lot of it was a trial and error process, and a lot of it was a lack of networking on my part. I needed to be doing a lot more involvement with other studios. I needed to make sure that I was getting more involved in the community, and I wasn't doing those things. I was just trying to survive. So I needed to make sure that I branched out more, and I think that would have helped me had I done that.
Okay. So going back to your students, you said you were in the elementary school trifecta, so are most of your students elementary age?
They are. So most of my students are between ages 6 and 10. So that's typically what I find in elementary schools. It's a great starting age because when you look at retention, the younger a child starts, unless other than 4 to 6 years old, but like 6 to 10, if they start within that time period, they actually are more likely to stay on for a longer period of time. But kiddos older or kiddos younger than that target age don't typically stay on as long, and I don't retain them for as long as I could.
Okay. Do you ever have families come in that bring all of their kids or anything like that?
Yes. The largest family that I have training with me right now is a 7-person family.
Oh, wow.
That's 5 kids plus mom and dad. And we have everyone from just one kid that comes in, 2 times a week to, I do family pricing, but it's 3 members plus. So they, if it's a family of 7, they pay for essentially a 3-member rate. And I see those people almost every single day.
And do the parents come in at all, or is it only the kids?
The parents actually train as well. So it's a really cool opportunity to watch the entire family take class together because we structure our classes that way. Everyone can take class all at once, so a family of 7 is in and out in 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool. And when you talk about those pricing options, how did you come up with all of that?
So I did a base price based on kind of some market research that I did within the community. Now, one of the things that I try to do to make sure that we kind of stand out from other martial arts studios is that I don't require a contract. So a lot of the other martial arts studios in the area will do a base rate for 2 times a week for their classes. I do a similar base rate for an unlimited period of time for my classes, so kiddos can come in as many times as they like per week. And I don't require that contract, so it actually boosts my retention by about 3 to 5 months compared to the industry average.
And do you collaborate with a lot of those other studios? I know you mentioned networking a little bit earlier, but just to come up with business strategies and pricing and all of that?
I do. I don't collaborate as much with, my direct competition, but other schools that are far enough to not be trying to take the same students that I am, I do work a lot with. And I meet with actually a couple of studio owners once a week. So it's nice to kind of be able to talk over different ideas that I have and get their opinions. The one guy that I talk to very frequently, he actually just bought into the business, so he's kind of he is a business partner with me, and he and I speak, and I have, 18 years less experience than he does, but it's nice to get his perspective.
Yeah, and another thing I saw in an article about you was that you were, I don't know if you're still in college, but you were going to college during all of this. How was that experience?
I got my Bachelor's of Science in Accounting when I was 20 years old in 2017. I actually took 3 years to graduate college instead of 4, just because I knew I wouldn't be able to handle a 4th year and run a business at the same time. So I took 8 credits, 8 classes, both semesters, to try to finish out my degree. And I had bought the business in October, and I was still working an overnight job until February to kind of make my own bills meet because I paid for my senior year in full. So that was probably the hardest time of my entire life. I would, go to school from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then I'd, zip over and I'd work at the martial arts studio from 3 to 8:30, and then I'd go to my overnight job from 10 to 6, and then I'd, drive over to the school and sleep in my car for an hour before classes started all over again. Wow. So it was really, really hard. I didn't have any weekend time because all I did was sleep over the weekends for, probably 8 months. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I finished. And I couldn't be happier now that I, have my bachelor's degree. But it was incredibly hard.
Yeah, no, it sounds like literally no sleep.
Yeah, I got about 3 hours non-consecutively a day for several months.
That's crazy. I'm cranky if I get like 6. So.
Right? Yeah, now I'm so the opposite now. It's like I used up all my sleep debt for my whole life because, I'm the same way. I get so grumpy.
Yeah. So you got your bachelor's in accounting. How has that helped you running your business?
It's nice to be able to know exactly how much I can, budget for different things. And, my accounting degree, I filed my own taxes for the last several years, and that's definitely saved me a couple thousand there. I do, I work on my own payroll. I, do my sales taxes. It's kind of nice to be able to do all of that myself and make sure that that's in-house and done correctly instead of having to rely on someone else to do that for me.
Clearly, Victoria has truly committed herself to this business and sacrificed a lot to make it work. So I wanted to ask her about her drive and motivation to do this and how she feels she's impacting her students.
I hope, at least, that I'm impacting my students well. My goal is to do that. I kind of try to live my whole life by a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote: "To know one life is breathed easier because you have lived, that is to have succeeded." My entire goal in teaching martial arts is to ensure that my students can grow up confident, that they can grow up determined, and that they can grow up safe. I have had, experiences in my life where I have been assaulted, especially when I was young, and I was able to endure that, but I want to make sure that any of my students don't have to go through that they have an understanding that they can use what they learn inside the studio to keep themselves alive, to keep themselves safe. And if I just stop one negative encounter from one of my students from happening, then I will have done my job correctly.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to answer this if it's too personal, but is that assault from a young age what kind of inspired you to be so invested in martial arts?
Yes, to be very honest with you. It's happened more than once, and one of the times it actually happened inside the martial arts studio, which was a little bit rough to deal with, but it steeled my resolve to make sure that I didn't let this happen anymore. And I think that's probably a big reason why I did end up buying the business as well, because I knew how great a martial arts could be, and our martial arts studio could be, and I knew how absolutely horrible it could be. And I wanted to make sure that, Family Martial Arts Center, which became Kicks Martial Arts, was as great as it was for me when I was growing up.
And Victoria, what, since you've had this business for a couple of years now, or 2 years, what plans do you have for the future? Are you working on any projects or growth development, anything like that right now?
We are. I just started with the local elementary school. I just started an after-school program. We'll be running a statewide tournament in August of this year that hopefully should have up to 20 of the local martial arts studios. It's at the Arapahoe County Fairgrounds. I am also eventually looking at expansion. I'm hoping by 2021 I'll have a second studio, and I have a couple of areas where I've already done market research to see that they would do well. I just officially worked with Cherry Creek School District. I am an official martial arts provider for them, so I can work with any school in the district, and I've already done so with about 5 of the local elementary schools. So I'm just kind of trying to build my classes, build a solid student foundation to where we will be able to branch out into that, second or third or fourth studio.
As Victoria plans for the future, she's now able to completely focus on the studio and grow her business. We hope you're inspired by Victoria's story to fight for what you want too. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.